listeners, welcome back to the Intentional Wellbeing Podcast. I'm excited because today I'm talking to a close friend of mine, and one of the reasons, I would say one of the key reasons that Yoga for All / Yoga for Everyone exists. She has been an educator in my life, a beacon in my life, a person I respect, a person that I love, and I wanted you all to meet her because without Christine, she will say otherwise, but I'm pretty certain that I wouldn't have the confidence or the knowledge I have today in order to have been able to write Yoga for Everyone and Yoga Where You Are, and to teach the Yoga for All training, and to feel really confident in a lot of different situations with working with bodies that's different than my own. So let me read her bio because she's the best. Christine Quaglia is a full-time social worker, part-time writer, and she loves to write about what affects all of our lives. Thoughts we have, questions we raise, and the ways in which we can grow and hopefully come to know and to become better so that we can do better. She's also co-authored a children's book called Charlotte's Shadow, which we'll talk about, and I'll probably lose my shit when we talk about that, with Dr. Anne DePape. Christine obtained her undergraduate degrees in English and psychology and her master's in social work from the University of Windsor. We have that in common. That's both our alma mater. Christine worked for the Children's Mental Health Program before transitioning back to the University of Windsor, where she's been working since 2007. Wow. And she accommodates students with a broad range of disabilities. Christine has done a TEDx talk, which I will share in the notes, on language and the perception of disability, as well as written her own personal experience of being born with a congenital neuromuscular disorder that requires her to use a wheelchair and receives various forms of assistance. Her disability has given her firsthand experience with the challenges and opportunities that come with having a visible disability. Christine lives with Charlie, who's adorable, the dog. They both like to be outside and taking walks, and Christine loves reading a lot. A lot. Welcome to the Intentional Wellbeing Podcast. Yay!
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
That's the cheer. That's the cheering of the crowd.
Well, it's a total mutual admiration society because I feel completely the same way about you, and you changed my life for the better. Aww. You continue to change my life for the better. I wouldn't have gotten certified as a yoga teacher without you.
Yes, you are a certified Yoga for All yoga teacher. Yay!
Gotta update the bio.
Yes, we forgot to add that to the bio.
Yeah, like if you hadn't seen me as you did, as a whole person, and as an opportunity to be embraced rather than a challenge to be avoided or feared, things would look a lot different in my life. So thank you to you.
I appreciate that, Christine. You are a bright light. I have to say, when you reached out to me, so to give a little story, why don't you start with the story of how we met, and I'll just fill in the details because it was really kind of interesting, and I'll kind of talk about how it is that your email also changed my life. So how do we meet?
So it was 2007 or 8. I don't remember exactly, but I was really sort of ending what I like to think about as the brain phase of my life. So I, my whole life, from childhood up until that point, 27, 28-ish, the thing that seemed to get talked about me the most was how smart I am and how I had so much potential, in terms of my brain. I had a physiotherapist who I loved. She was so great. And she would give me these, and I was a bright child. I was keen. I was, I asked lots of questions. Basically the way I am now, but hopefully little. Yeah, but little, and
like a little kid. Yeah,
and hopefully with some degree of improved table manners and social skills and things like that. So And Jill, and it was a source of pride for myself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when I would go to physio and Jill would give me tasks, I could tell I wasn't getting a very high mark, right? Like, no,
Yeah.
it wasn't because of her. It was because, like, I my body could only go so far as it could
Sure.
go, right?
Yeah.
And she really picked up on my disappointment more than anything else. And I think with the tools she had available to her, which was actually like a kind thing to do, she would, in a way, she would say, Christine, you have a great brain. You have a great brain. So that was just like symptomatic of sort of the messaging that on the whole I kind of received, right? So I was 27, 28. I was done school, starting my career, and a friend of mine said to me, we would talk about many different things. And one of the things I talked about was I wanted to exercise more. I wanted to get into better shape. I don't even know if I knew what that meant exactly. I just knew that there had been a certain level of neglect in terms of my body. And my friend, in his infinite wisdom, picked up on that and said, why do you neglect your body so much and ignore it at the detriment? Because you're more than a brain. You're a body, and you're a spirit, and it was such an important question in my life. And the reason I knew it was important initially was because it hurt me.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
And and I knew it was because this person cared so much, but I also knew how deeply true it was. And it made me really sad for myself. And the reason was because I thought, I've got this broken, damaged body that does not work. It is not going to improve. I swear to you, from the time I eventually refused to go to physio, because I'm like, well, if I can't get A's, I'm not going to go to physio, obviously. That feels like a waste of my time. Which was monumentally childish, but it was okay because I was a child. So
yeah, and that's where you were at the time, right? That's fair.
Yeah, I reasoned as best as I could. And hand to God, from the ages of about, I don't know, early teens-ish until mid to late 20s, I was like, school, 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 brain, 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 work, 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 work. It was a very sort of limited existence in a sense. Like, there were obviously social experiences and things, but so then when my friend asked me that question, I really started to give it thought, and I really started to give it consideration. And I had always wanted to do yoga, always. I had romanticized it. I knew I wanted things that I could not give language to until, in a way, vis-a-vis that question, I was forced to do so. And so, when someone loves you and encourages you, and I think sometimes we really do have to see ourselves through the eyes of people we love and trust before we can see what they see, because we've covered over it in so much stuff. And that was another thing my friend said. He was like, there's like this thin layer of crap, and then there's you. There's the bright, shiny
light.
And you meant all the human stuff that we cover over our life with, the self-doubt and the fear and the insecurity stuff of being human, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I was like, well, maybe I can do this. And so I wrote to 4 yoga teachers in the community. One of them, thank goodness, was you. And at first, it was a scary and quite dispiriting experience because nobody was answering me back. And then, like a little light in the dark, it was like, bing, and there was your email. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, it blew my mind. I was like, oh my God. I was like, this could be a real thing. And then you were practicing out of a church in our town, in our mutual town where we live.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got rid of the pings, but I don't even know what to do about the males.
That's fine. It's all good. It's human. It's real. We all know what those sounds are. Yeah, we're doing the best we can with what we got.
And what I got in terms of the techie know-how, a little limited. I'm not gonna lie. Anyway, so you answered me back, and it was February when we agreed to meet up.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a warm night in February, so I walked to the church where you were practicing from. It was near to my house at the time,
which is perfect.
It was
like kismet, right?
It was all like written in the
starry
solar system. And we practiced, and I was very nervous walking to that class. I was very, very nervous. And I was like, and all the thoughts, right? I was like, this is a mistake. I'm like, I wasn't thinking it, because I had all those ideas in my head about what yoga is and what it's supposed to do for a person and how you're supposed to look sort of when you go into it, and what your ability and skill level is supposed to be. And I walked out of that first session with you a changed person.
Aww.
I still had my doubts, not about you at all, but about me. And I had my fear, but you gave me the courage and the wherewithal, and you were so excited.
I was.
You were so excited. I couldn't believe it. You were like, I was like, oh, is she like happy to be here and happy to be doing this? And it was such a different experience than what I normally, people are like no one ever really says it, but you can hear the wheels turning, like, oh my God, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? Like,
people wear a lot of that on their face, actually.
They do. And you had like none of it. You weren't panicked. You certainly were not like, you were just like, we're going to figure it out. Like, you weren't promising, you weren't like, we're going to get you out of the chair. Yeah. And you're going to be like
doing headstand tomorrow.
Because that would have been a lie, really. And you weren't doing any of that, but you were just really excited for the opportunity. And you treated me like an opportunity, which was such a gift. And like I said, it really changed my life. I don't know that I would have started going to a gym. I don't know that I would have attempted to ride a bike. I don't know that I would have committed to any movement in my body without, the question that led me to you that opened up everything else, right? So
I have to take a deep breath, because that comment is so meaningful to me. And often when I go to teach, like if I go and do a workshop somewhere or a teacher training somewhere, I will tell this story. I will say how I had an experience where I got an email in my inbox, and you outlined what your abilities were and what you were hoping to achieve. And it hurt my heart that nobody else got back to you, because you reached out to yoga people in yoga studios. And so many people are afraid of what they don't understand. And for me, I want to know, like, I want an invitation to learn about what I don't understand. And it is my understanding of yoga that as long as we are breathing and we are conscious of the breath, we are doing yoga. It's an inside job. It's an inside look at your soul. It doesn't really have to do with the physicality, but here in the West, we focus so much of our attention on the physicality. And to be quite honest, yoga asana in and of itself is the thing that is discriminatory, because not all of us can do all of the complicated poses. But those of us coming to class, a lot of us can do that breathing and deep internal work. And to be honest, I felt really lucky to have had a yoga teacher training where I had a person in my class who was a single amputee. And because I had been practicing yoga the longest, and was keen, I always got paired up with this person.
I love it.
And so I had to start thinking about, I can't simply say to this person, step your right foot back behind you, let's come into a warrior two or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's not available to them. And it was just any opportunity that I can get to learn something new and have an impact to allow somebody to do something that they always wanted to do, I want to show up for that. And that is my yoga journey. And when I met you, I never in a million billion years would have ever thought that our connection, our journey together, which was like 3, 4, 5 years, I can't even remember now, our journey together would have led to an opportunity to start looking at yoga asana and movement in general in a totally different way. And I always want to see people as the wholeness of who they are. And I think as a society, we automatically see people who use a chair to get through the world as somehow less than. And when we were talking in the pre-show, which you can catch on Patreon, when we were talking in the pre-show about constant changing body images, it makes me sad to think that our central focus around body image really is steeped in ableism, that we don't see all bodies as good bodies, and that everybody has the opportunity, and with the right teacher and the right outlook, an opportunity to come to the mat.
Yeah.
So you taught me to, my training as an Anusara teacher taught me, okay, I can figure this out. She's going to come in here. If I can get her to breathe, if she can move her head, if she can shrug her shoulder, whatever it is we do together, it's going to be a joyful, intentional movement. And that is going to be Christine's yoga practice.
And that's
Christine,
what it was.
Right? We did what we could do.
Yep.
And I loved that you were open to allowing me to learn. I love that you let me ask questions. I loved that our relationship, I think we were instantly friends. Like you came in, your personality melded with mine.
Yeah.
We live in the same neighborhood, which was like, we live closer now than we did then. Since you've moved, we live closer now.
It's not that far either way, but it's
either way, it's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Either way, we lived, I think we lived 5 minutes apart. Now we live 3 minutes apart, but either way, it wasn't that far.
We'll live together.
Yeah. And it was just, you allowed me to see you as an opportunity for growth. Aww. For myself. And I never want to use my teaching as a vehicle for my own personal growth, but sometimes that just happens. And it changed my whole understanding of disability. And I remember not too long ago, I think it was the Ontario government that had all the billboards. It also might have been a municipal thing where they had all the billboards out everywhere that said, see the ability. Right?
I don't remember who that was. I don't remember.
Who did that? Do you remember seeing those?
I do, but I don't remember where they stemmed from.
Neither do I. I don't remember what that was a part of, what campaign that was a part of, but see the ability. And it always took me back. Every time I would stop at a light and I would see that, or I would catch that billboard somewhere, it reminded me of that moment when you and I met, because I was looking for, I've always said when I've been teaching yoga, we're not focusing on what we can't do. We're focusing on what we can do and seeing if we could make that easier or better or more challenging or more attuned or more intentional. And that's all we're doing. And we're coming back to our breath. This is a journey inward. This is not a journey outward.
Yeah. And that was really, you said so many important things just now, but as you are known for doing, it's very on brand for you. But but one of the, important things you said was about, the opportunity that I gave you, and you gave me an opportunity too, because to see myself through eyes other than my own as, again, an opportunity to be embraced rather than
a problem to be solved, right?
Or a problem to be solved. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It forced me in a positive way to begin the process of seeing myself that way too.
Yeah.
Because the lives we have and the relationships we have with ourselves are so important. but
Yes.
we don't exist in isolation. We don't. We're
Exactly.
relational beings, and
Yes.
we're wired for connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see yourself, and some of it was explicit that I experienced, and some of it was more implicit. And
Mm-hmm.
I think just going to veer off course for a second and what I'm
Of course. I love veering off course. It's my whole life. The path not taken.
trackless. Yeah, just trackless. Forget getting off track. There's not even one.
There isn't one. Exactly.
Yeah. This psychologist, Phil Stutz, who I think I've mentioned to you,
Mm-hmm.
and his documentary on Netflix, done by freaking Pineapple Express Jonah Hill, of all people. I know.
Interesting.
I know. I'm like, what is happening right now? But it's the most beautiful documentary, and I've read his books ever since. And he says, and it's true, like 80-90% of communication is nonverbal.
Oh, yes.
It's
Yeah.
what we don't say and what we don't hear.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're having all of these things either explicitly or implicitly told to you, and there's a value judgment attached to it, and your
Mm.
body is less valuable, like my
Mm.
mind was very valuable. If
Right.
it was like insuring J-Lo's legs, it was like, better get some insurance on this sucker, you know what I mean? Because yeah, but
Your big ass brain needed to be insured. Yeah, big ass brain.
and it doesn't have to be all both. Like,
Right.
you know, I can be smart and also have a body that doesn't operate according to this manual that I don't know who made it up, but apparently it
Exactly.
doesn't measure up to that. And so when there's value judgments that are told to you in myriad of different ways, you start to feel the fear that other people feel. And you start to feel the lack of value that other people are implying or just full on saying that you don't have. And when you were talking, I couldn't help but think about this as well. Like, think about how we judge bodies.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we judge everything else. We judge them according to productivity. Yeah, but what can
Yes.
your body do? What can
Yes.
it not do? And the body is a miraculous thing. It blows my mind that people can climb mountains. And
Yes.
I
Yes.
tell
Me
you
too.
anything. A friend of mine also said to me once, and this is only funny because it's true. It's 100% true. They said, listen, if you weren't born needing a wheelchair, you were probably going to end up in one. And I'm like, that is accurate. And I'm going to tell you why.
Wow.
I would have been doing some type of, I'm a physical person. I am ironically a hugely, so I would have been like, oh, there's like a mountain to attempt to scale. Okay. All right.
I'm gonna zip line through the Amazon. That
Right.
sounds like a thing I want to do. You
And
still can
would
do
there
that
have
though.
been the planning required involved to not hurt myself in some potentially catastrophic
You
way?
wouldn't have done it.
I would like to say yes, but I can't really do that, which is why what makes my friend said makes it hilarious, because there is, at the very least, an element of truth in it. But the thing is, like, I still want to do those things.
Yes.
I just can't in conventional ways. So I do
Yes.
what I can with what I have. But
Yes.
the value judgments placed on my body are, yeah, but what can it do? Oh, you can't do that? You lost a point.
Oh gosh.
Oh,
Yeah.
you can't, and it's in ways big and small, right?
Yeah.
From how I'm able to chop food to whether or not I can actually zip line or surf or do whatever. Like,
Which you can. It's just not in the way that
right.
those of us who don't move through the world with a chair can. And
right.
why is there more value on a body that doesn't need a chair than a body that does, or needs crutches, or needs any other
mobility
modern technology for modality,
yeah.
right? I just think the world needs to change around that.
It does, but I, you know, I hope that it will. I don't know that it will. But again, I mean,
so
like,
many hopes.
but I mean, my own father would not let me take adaptive horseback riding lessons because he anticipated something disastrous happening.
Oh, really?
He knew me too. He was like, he's like, that is not going to end well with this one. I'm like,
Oh my goodness.
I know. Yeah, I thank you for saving me from myself. I do. But I'm just saying, like, you know, and I was saying this to another friend one time. I was like, you know, but I want to do all these things, and I can't.
Yes.
And this friend said to me, the desire has to count. The intention has to count.
Yeah.
And the effort put behind it. So I'm not ziplining. I'm not riding a horse. I'm not surfing. But I do lots of other things that, in some people's estimation, I have no business doing at all. And I'm learning now that that's okay. And I don't want to be measured in any realm of my life, a physical realm, an intellectual realm, a spiritual realm. I don't want to be judged by what I can do. I want to be judged by who and what. Well, I mean, nobody wants to be judged at all, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yes. Yeah.
I want to be considered and thought of according to who and what I am, not what. None of us should be valued or devalued or evaluated in any way by what we can do. Doing doesn't have to do with being. Doing has to do with doing.
I'm giving you finger snaps because that is 100% the truth. But we are stuck in this kind of ableist world where everything is, like you said, measured on productivity. And as we're moving into a new year, I'm always interrogating myself about, okay, why do I believe this? And, you know, why does society believe this? And, you know, how can I disrupt this pattern of thought? And I never understood everybody's fear around disability, right? That it's part of life. You know, it happens. A friend of mine once said that the disability club is the only club that's always accepting new members. And the disability club, if you live long enough, we'll all become part of the club. And that's the two things this person has said to me.
And if you're thoughtless enough in activity planning, you will also probably be on board.
Part of that community. And you need to get on board, honestly.
Sign up early.
Yeah.
At that discount.
Time's running out.
At that TikTok.
Yeah.
And I think, it's, you know, people who don't think that anything will ever, and listen, we should all do what we can to enhance our health.
Of course.
I gypped myself out of, because I devalued my body so hard. I robbed myself of time that I will never get back. And that's on me. And it's also not on me because I trusted the world more, I think, at the time. And I trusted what I was being told.
Yeah, for sure.
So we all have a responsibility to think about our health and think about what we're going to do to preserve that. But what we don't have a responsibility toward is someone who thinks, oh, you can sort of do that thing, but you can't do it the way I've seen it on TV or in career. I don't owe that person anything, really.
No.
And they're entitled to their understanding of the world just as I am entitled to mine. And, you know, like I use the word walk. I heard myself using it in this podcast. I use it when I speak. I use it when I write. And it was a real discrepancy that I caught myself thinking of, like I found myself thinking about after I caught myself saying it. Right. And then I thought, but is it a discrepancy, really? Like, who decided that walking means exclusively ambulation using two legs, which you were born with, as opposed to using one leg if you are someone with, are you walking less because you're down a limb? Am I walking less because I use a mobility aid to help me achieve what I use a wheelchair to help me achieve what other people achieve in what is considered a more natural way? So that really got me thinking about language and how we use it and how it can be weaponized and how it can be, but how it also needs to be rethought, because I am walking in the ways that are available to me. Yeah. I am doing it just like I am doing yoga in the ways that are available to me. And I won't ever medal in a marathon. I won't ever.
But you could if you wanted to.
I could. I could. Mm-hmm. But I won't.
I don't want to, but you could.
Maybe I will some. I don't know. Maybe. But what I'm saying is, my point was in a conventional sense.
Sure.
I will not. You know, we see the images of people running across bridges and running through New York City. And it's a thrill. And it's not to minimize anybody else's achievement or accomplishment at all. I will not participate in those things in those conventional ways. And if and when I ever do participate and do get my thanks for coming out medal, it won't make
everybody gets those at a marathon, just so you know.
I know. And I might. I don't know if I want one. That's a conversation that's a 10 years from now podcast.
Yeah, conversation. Yeah, for sure.
But the difference is I won't see it as less of an achievement than I would have been like, why would I even bother doing that? Because it's not going to mean as much as someone who's doing it on their own two legs, you know? Yeah. So it's an ongoing daily practice to undo. It's that inside job that you were talking about, of which yoga is such an integral part, that you undo all the teaching.
Yes.
And
I call it brainwashing.
That also applies. And we do fear that which we don't understand. Like and we don't see the world as it is. We see it as we are. And I'll never forget, you know, like you were talking about the training that goes on, like what you were trained about in terms of disability. And it was like scary business. It's like, what the hell? Yes. And you were taught to fear it, right?
Yes.
And I realize now more and more, I was taught that in terms of race. I'll never forget.
Right.
You and I were at dinner, and I don't remember the context. I wish I did. But we were talking about something related to race, and I said, oh, well, I never think about that. And you, in a pointed but good friend way, calling me to my own attention, said, well, white people never have to. And I was like,
dun 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 dun! New things to learn about myself. Yeah.
And then I was like, oh God, that is so gross, because it's so right and it's so true. But and it had to do. I said, you know, if I see a situation of racism where someone's being embarrassed or someone's being like whatever, I feel like I don't have the right to say anything, because I don't want to make the situation worse for the person. And you said, say something.
Yes.
Bring it up, because that is your own fear.
Yes.
Versus what is right, period. And that really, really, really did call myself to my own attention. So I thank you for that, because it was a big eye-opening thing. And, you know, I thought that, you know, racism was actively slurring people or actively opposing, you know, interracial marriage or whatever the case may be. Yeah. And from that moment, I have learned not all the things I need to know, not even close, but I've learned that it is so much more nuanced than that.
I think because we don't talk about it a lot in school or in
No.
situations, or people generally don't have friends that look different from them because we tend to de facto segregate, right? Like you feel comfortable hanging out with folks that look like you. I feel comfortable in hanging out with folks that look like me. And perhaps we don't, if we are in the majority of the population, perhaps we don't have access to meeting people who are different than we are. And if our parents have never had this conversation, or we haven't called ourselves into our own attention to actually unpack it and look at it, we'll never see it because it doesn't directly affect us. And that limits our growth as human beings, and it keeps us from
Each other.
learning about learning about other cultures.
Yeah, so I think that kind of only tells half the story, because I could be hanging out with someone who looks very different than me and are just as or more disabled than I am. Because the same friend who asked me that question tells me often, "You're the least disabled person I know." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And
Yeah.
they said, "Because what does it mean that you're in a wheelchair? That doesn't make you disabled. That's a label that gets assigned to you that
Yeah.
suggests something lacking. But in the ways that matter, in your heart, in your mind, you're not lacking a thing. You're this bright, shiny being."
Agreed.
Oh, thank you. And it meant so much, again, coming from person and now people, that I love and trust so much. But it also made me rethink, what does it mean to be disabled?
Yeah.
Is someone who could engage as people did in the slave trade or in Nazi Germany, or I'm sure their physical functioning was fully intact the way we have decided it has to be in order to not be categorized as disabled. But are
Yeah.
they not functioning in some way? I would argue that
Yeah.
they are.
They are.
And so that was that whole, "You're the least disabled," and that's an extreme example. Obviously, there are
Sure.
lots of people who do, you know, maybe less egregious forms of harm, but harm nevertheless, right? And
Yes.
so
Yes, for
I
sure.
think we need to really, and I have thought about this ever since this person said that to me, what does it mean to be disabled?
Mm-hmm.
What does
Mm-hmm.
that mean? And
Mm-hmm.
you know, how do we determine that? And what I'm coming to realize through research I'm continuing to do, like scholarly research I continue to work on, and also just sort of personal development, is it's an arbitrary thing.
It's an arbitrary label
It's
that
arbitrary.
determines.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody decided these people, because they don't function like these people, even though they're equally functioning in society, just in a different
Right.
way, get labeled a certain way, and we can assign judgments a certain way. Like the amount of people that see you using a chair to navigate through life and talk to you like you have
A
a
cognitive.
neurodivergent, yeah, a cognitive impairment, or neurodivergent in some way. Why do you automatically assume because somebody moves through the world in a chair that they also have a cognitive disability?
And it wouldn't
Or
be a bad thing if that were the case, but it's not
yes.
the case. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Like why do you automatically assume though?
well, because we have structures in society that are indicative of certain things. Like,
Yes.
even if we want to sort of think about this in terms of race or whatever,
Mhm. Mhm.
someone who is of a different race than someone who presents as white as I do, somehow in the scheme of things, in the hierarchy of things,
Mhm.
that person is less than I am. Like, yeah, I got
Right. White supremacy.
still.
Woo woo.
What's that?
White supremacy. Woo, wins
Right.
again.
Yeah.
Woo woo.
Right.
Yeah. Mhm.
But like all things, race is a construct at the end of the day. There are, biological, physiological differences that make us look different from one another. But the performance of race and the subsequent performance of racism are, and not, I'm not suggesting, I'm performing disability or someone else is performing, but there is a performative aspect to functioning in society, right? We might,
totally. 100%.
even because of how we're conditioned, we either fall down or up to certain tropes or stereotypes that are posed upon, right? And even in terms of gender, women you have to perform, maybe being bigger than you are, or a little softer than you.
All the bullshit
There's
gender stereotypes.
There's an aspect to performance, which then leads to the performance of sexism. And it's all performance. And it's so much, it's all ego driven, right? And if we were to strip that away, there are undeniable differences between all of us, because each of our stories are so unique and each of our experiences are so unique. Like, no offense, I don't want to be the same as anybody else. Okay.
Why would you though?
Nobody would.
Right?
Nobody would. We're here to write our own tickets and tell our own stories and do our own things. But, we perform sameness for the sake of safety. And it makes it easier then to other somebody else. Well, I'm bad, but they're worse. You know what I'm saying? They're, and it's very, very bizarre. It's incredibly bizarre when you sort of step back and peel back all of the layers. We're, in the ways that count, we're the same. We're the same. And everything else is performative to an extent.
Performative. And a way to categorize people so that some people feel superior and feel justified in treating people who look different from themselves as less than. And I wish that people could come to that understanding. One thing that you mentioned that really always, whenever I hear the word stereotype, I always like to unpack it in some kind of way. And one thing I heard from, I'm blanking on who said it, but somebody that I really respect. I'm trying to figure out where I heard it. But it's not the thing that stereotypes aren't true, because some stereotypes are true. It's just a singular story. It tells one story and it groups everybody into that one story, right? And that's the problem. That's the problem, that people have many stories. And the story that you tell yourself that allows you to dehumanize someone else is a story that you need to unpack for yourself. You have a really good saying, explicit language coming up here, adult language coming up here. Warning, warning, adult language. Fix your fucked is a Christine saying.
Take credit for that.
I know, you heard it somewhere. I heard it from you.
My friend's wife said it. My friend's wife, fix your fucked. And I'm like, I'm getting that tattooed somewhere on my person, because if I can suddenly look at somebody else and say, you are inherently less than I am, and that gives me the right to vilify you, to dehumanize you, to other you, to see your life and yourself and feel as though I can do whatever I want with that life itself. You know who that says nothing about? That person. You know who that says everything about? Me.
You.
Fix your fucked, girl. Fix your fucked. Because it's not, and that is an inside job. Of which, I think, as we've already said before, yoga is such, it's a very uncomfortable part. You're doing it right. very
Yes.
important part. And before we came on the air, we were talking about having a rich interior life. And I was saying, I've always felt that I've had one ever since I was an only, I'm still an only child, obviously, but I was an only child. And I had a very rich interior life that could also be incredibly uncomfortable. And I think we are taught to stay removed from ourselves and subsequently other people.
I would agree.
Because if we fear ourselves, how can you not fear other people? If you are not safe in your own self and in your own skin and in your own life, it is impossible to really feel safe
with other people,
especially when we encounter difference, whatever.
Right. Yes.
I don't even know what that means exactly, but I mean we're different people, and we have different experiences and different stories, but I'm talking about that inherent difference that allows you to enslave someone or lead them to a gas chamber or murder them or assault or violate them in some other way. That's the kind of separation that I'm talking about when I talk about that.
That makes sense. To slightly shift gears, I want to talk about Charlotte Shadow, and I want to try and talk about it without losing my shit.
It's okay if you do. It could help with sales. No, I'm just kidding. All about the sales.
Awesome book. I bought 7 copies during the holidays, and I gave them out to like my nephew, who's 6. He's going to be 7 next month. My friends' children. I gave it out to adults because the story is so beautiful. I think it's been out there long enough that we can talk a little bit about what the story is about. Tell me how you came to write Charlotte Shadow, and maybe give us a brief synopsis of what it's about, because it speaks to what we're talking about. It speaks to disability for sure.
So my friend, thank you so much, by the way, for championing this book, not through your purchase of it, but through social media and a million other means that you have provided us. You've done videos for us. You've just been incredible. So thank you.
Thank you. I love the book. It speaks to me. And when you talk about it and I lose my shit, then we'll talk about why it speaks to me.
Sounds like a plan. So you're like, let me get the book. So this book has been about 20 years in the making. So my co-author and I, Dr. Anne-Marie DePape, we met in university. We met in the top of the student center. Any UWindsor alum from the late 90s, early 2000s will know what I'm talking about.
I was there in the early 90s, so you were there when they had the new student center. It was building while I was there.
Well, it was there was like a top floor, and there were vending machines, like vending machines, like pay phones, the whole thing.
And that quiet room in there where people were napping during exam week. Everybody was up there.
So I was like on my way to a professor's office hours. It was a challenging class, child psychopathology, and I saw Anne-Marie. I hope she's okay with me telling this. She always wore an orange baseball cap from Old Navy. I can't believe she got rid of it. I asked her a few weeks ago. I'm like, "Where's your orange baseball cap?" She's like, "I don't even know." I'm like, "Oh my God, that was a classic piece." I'm like, if we ever
you get rid of it?
Like, where is that going to be for the archives, right, babe?
Yeah.
It's one of those things. So I knew she was in my class because I recognized the hat. And I said, "Hey, what's going on?" She's like, "Oh, I'm studying." I'm like, "Yeah, me too." I said, "I'm actually going to the prof's office hours because I don't know what's going on." She's like, "Oh, that's a good idea." And I said, "Okay, well, I'll let you know what she says." And we exchanged numbers. And 20 years later, 20 plus years later, here we are. And one of the things we bonded over was disability. Anne-Marie went on to get her PhD in psychology, and particularly with a focus on autism and children with autism. So disability has always played a role in her life. And obviously it's played a different role in mine. But it was just something that always kind of bonded us and that we talked about and we thought about. and sort of, we used to go for really long walks along the Ganache Trail and get Slinkies and talk about, life.
Slinkies is ice cream, in case you
Right.
were wondering.
That's
Yep.
an important aspect. Yes, ice cream. And, we would talk about life and solve the world's problems as only you can do when you're 20 years old. And then
Yes.
one of the things we would talk about is, we should write a children's book one day. And, life gets, you're going to school and you're starting a job and a career and getting married and buying houses and doing all these things. So life gets in the way, right? But then COVID happened. And we had run out of bread making and other projects that we could be sourdough starting.
Cookie baking.
Yeah, that we could be participating in. It was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do now? And it was like, I think I said something like, hey, why don't we write that book? We have the time. And Anne-Marie was, of course, game and on board. And so we wrote this book about a very special girl who is special because of who she is as a person and not because she happens to have a disability. And that was of critical importance to both of us. Our main character, Charlotte, just like all of us, is a person first.
Yeah.
She is not her whatever we've decided a disability means. She's not her gender, whatever we've decided it means to be a girl. She's not, she's not any of those constructs that we impose upon ourselves and each other. She is a person first who happens to have a disability and who happens to require a service dog, which is a sort of surprise twist at the end of the book. But it has been out long enough, so I don't think I'm giving anything away at this point. It's been out since July. Shadow is her service dog. But Shadow doesn't see Charlotte as someone he is serving or working for.
Here's where the tears come
Okay.
for me.
He sees her as she is. He sees her as an extraordinary person. And we all need someone in our life who does that for us, because we are, again, we're wired for connection. And that's why when my friend emphasizes to me, you're the least disabled person I know, it's not a denial of my disability. It's an acknowledgement of my personhood first.
Oh my God. Can we put that on a t-shirt?
And it was a huge moment in my life and a healing moment in my life. And when Shadow sees Charlotte as the superhero, and Charlotte loves superheroes, and Shadow sees her as a superhero. She's not a child who needs his assistance. She is this extraordinary person because she is. And she happens to have a disability, whatever that means. We can't get into all the weeds of language, all the things that it, says and doesn't say. But, and so we're so proud of this book because yes, it's a book about a child with a disability and a service animal, but more than that, it's a book that any child, any family, any classroom should be interested in having on their shelves, because it's a book about love, about friendship, and about inclusion, and about representation. And I don't know about you. Well, I think I do, but I don't want to speak for you is what I should have said. But for me, and I don't think your experience was too different, as a kid growing up in the 80s, in your case, it would have been a bit earlier in the 70s. And I love to read. Okay. Like that is my jam. Over the pandemic, I read like 300 books.
That's amazing. I'm very jealous. That's my inward. Remember we talked about it at the top of the show, how we spend a lot of time in our heads. That's the best way I can spend time in my head. It's reading.
I can calm my anxiety. And I was so anxious, particularly during that first year of the pandemic.
When we didn't know what we didn't know.
So every moment that I was anxious, which was many of them, I was like, time to read again. So I was like, pick up a book.
Let me find a book I've been meaning to read.
Exactly. So, but I've always been that way. I was the kid reading the grocery receipts in the car. Like I needed this. But I did not see myself in the pages of those books.
Of books. I understand that. Same thing.
Right. And so I think that was always sort of in the back of my mind about how important it is to feel and be seen. But it's interesting because friends of mine, whenever they dream about me, my one friend in particular has told me this. Well, a few friends have, but she was the first person, I think, to tell me this. And whenever she dreams about me, and we always cry about it when she tells me about this, because I'm never in a wheelchair. And that's that is your unconscious. That's your spirit allowing you to strip away all the crap of the world and see someone as they are. And that's why it's so moving, right? Again, Absolutely. It's not a denial of the presence of whatever we've decided a disability is, but it's an acknowledgement of the person and that personhood, their humanity. And my friend doesn't need to be dreaming in order to do that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be friends. That would be really weird. But
right.
But the dream allows access to that site, right?
Yes.
And so the book, and part of, yes, we wanted it to have the surprise ending, but we also wanted to establish her as a person before the sight and the judgment of the world could be placed upon what it means to be a child who uses a wheelchair and has a service dog. We wanted to establish her as a person first. Yeah.
Whenever I read the book and whenever I talk about the book, I have to catch myself, because every time I see myself in Charlotte, and that's all that anybody wants, is to be seen for the wholeness of who they are. So when I read the book and I saw the surprise ending, which I kind of anticipated because I know who you are, it was really important to me as a person to understand those, to be seen beyond the difference, because I don't, look like everybody around me, and that I'm still a person, right? I'm a person first, and I happen to be a Black person. Do you know what I mean? I'm a person
And I think what the best thing, the greatest gift, one of the greatest gifts that we can give ourselves is to, if we're lucky enough, as I have been, be reminded that difference is imposed upon us. And then to turn around and remind ourselves that inherently I am not different from the person who's ziplining in a more conventional way. You're not different from the blonde-haired white woman who you're undoubtedly treated differently, as I have been. But inherently, on the inside, where true value lies, and if people remembered that on a more regular basis, we would have far less problems in the world than we do.
Agreed.
There is not, in terms of the star stuff, the star seeds that were all planted inside all of us, they're not different. The way we show up in the world and the experiences through which, this whatever larger force might be out there is experiencing through us are going to be different.
Yes.
But we are not different in any way that matters at all. And you're catching me on a good day. So other days I'd be like, oh, so different than everything else. It's not the same for me. And
yes.
So you're catching me on a good Friday. Hot on a good Friday. But
on a Friday that we're fully connected to who we are, right? It's a good day to talk about.
But it's really hard to come to that knowing and understanding when you don't see yourself anywhere.
Right.
And when you don't see yourself represented, whether it's in children's literature, whether it's in mainstream media, whether it's in, popular culture. If you don't see yourself, it's very hard to develop that inner sense of knowing. And our illustrator, Kenzie Edge, did the most beautiful job. She's illustrated a second book for us as well. Not a Charlotte's Shadow, not yet. Anyway, that's a future thing. It's coming. It's coming. Don't rush.
It's coming. I feel it. Don't rush it. No, everything in its own time.
But this is a second book that our imprint, Little Books Press, has acquired, and we're getting ready to put it out in the world, hopefully soon. But our illustrator, Kenzie Edge, did an amazing job because she inherently understood we were not trying to hide the fact that Charlotte has a disability. It's not that it was something to be ashamed of. So, Charlotte was very strategic in the pages of the book, so you wouldn't see the wheelchair until closer to the end, right?
Right.
But it wasn't a hiding out of shame. It was a hiding to preserve a twist, a literary twist. It was also to give Charlotte the chance
to be
a person. And imagine if we all gave each other that chance. And that's what makes the book so beautiful and universal. It's not just a book for children with disabilities or families who experience disability. It's a book for anyone.
For everybody. It's not even a children's book, to be honest. It's a book for adults too.
Yeah, there is some sophistication to the message.
It absolutely. It's a joyful book. It's a beautiful book. It's a dream book. It's something that is so necessary. And I always try to keep a couple extra copies around so that if I see somebody who I think needs to hear this story, here's a book. I think everybody needs to hear the story, but sometimes people are having really difficult times. I'm like, you got to read this book.
You're the best cheerleader.
The twist will blow your mind.
You're like cheerleader extraordinaire, man. You really are.
You know what? We're all in this together. As much as we really are. Some of us are going to have to come about it in a wholly different way. But if I have an opportunity to amplify or to draw attention to something that I think is really important, isn't that my job as a human being, to support other human beings? Isn't that what I'm here for that human connection? And I've been very fortunate to have a very big platform in order to do this. And why shouldn't I share that? I certainly didn't get here by myself. You're a big part of how I got here. Why wouldn't I want to elevate everybody who has helped me along the way? It takes a village, right? To do anything, not to raise a child, but to really do anything. And I really wish we could see the humanity more in each other and realize that we have to be cheerleaders for each other. Otherwise,
what are we doing? What are we even doing? And I think it's so great that you recognize that, but it's also why it hurts so much when other people don't. And it's why, when a representational book like Charlotte's Shadow comes up, it hits hard for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because that recognition is so, it shouldn't be, but it's quite rare. You know?
Yes. We have a lot of work to do as human beings.
Yeah. And I'm a hopeful person in general. But something that's made me sad as I've gotten a little older is reality set in.
Oh, I know.
Reality bites,
really
man.
It does. Wasn't there a movie called that? It's true, though. Yeah, it's true. It's true. That's why we like to live in our heads, Christine, because the reality within my head is fabulous.
It's a very hopeful place.
It is. I eat a lot of cotton candy in there.
You have like a Katy Perry video up there. You're just like cotton candy clouds and stuff. No, but
I do.
I have hope for change, and I have hope for people who are willing to do the work that it takes, and who are willing to own what they don't do well and what they don't know and and I will mess that up 100%.
Everybody will. We're
Yeah,
human beings. Nobody's ever going to get this 100% right. We're not always going to use the right language. We're not always going to be fully aware. We're not always going to be fully conscious. We're going to say the wrong things. We're going to step in it. But if we own that as human beings, and first of all, make the apologies where you need
yeah,
to, like own your shit,
fix,
say,
fucked.
if you fix your fucked, and then learn from that and move on, that's the point, right? Instead of digging in and becoming defensive and not understanding what you've done.
I think
right?
people have within them, though, a fear of their own darkness and of other people's darkness as well, because I don't know what I have some thoughts on why I have perfectionist tendencies that we don't need to discuss right now. But
this is a podcast another day.
You can have me, but I'll circle back someday. You can have me back on some other day, unless people are like, no, never.
Next book.
But I think we're afraid. I think it's safe to say that fear drives most hate, and it also drives most indifference. And I think when we're afraid, like I know for me, my perfectionist tendencies are like, oh my gosh, if I say the wrong thing, I will not be forgiven. And so that leads me to either say or do worse things, or to say or do nothing at all. Because we can't love that which we don't trust. And so if I don't, you mentioned at the top, like I'm a writer. I'm a very prolific, unpublished writer, except in the children's literature world, at least at this point. We'll see how that.
Right. As long as you're still alive, things can always change.
That's the plan, girl. So, no, but it's not true that I'm unpublished. Like some of my work is available on Medium and other magazines within Medium and places like that. But I wrote a piece a while ago, and I was talking about, the concept of namaste, which is sort of becoming something not to be utilized anymore, but I'm just going to reference it for the point I'm about to make. So namaste, we were traditionally taught it means, the divine light in me sees the divine light in you. That's still correct. That's so correct, but the co-opting of it is not. That's the issue. And what I argue in this piece that I wrote was we need a counter concept to that. So I came up with Namastark. And what Namastark meant to me and continues to mean to me is the divine light and in me honors and trusts the divine darkness in me too. Because if I can't trust both, I can't trust either one. And then I can't love both. But then I also can't love that in other people, which makes unforgiving and bring unforgiveness back to me. And it's something I probably fail at more than I succeed, but I want to try to remember that. So if I do mess up, which I inevitably will, I can trust other people enough to offer me
the grace to make that mistake and the grace to learn from that mistake.
That's right. That's right. Because there will be mistakes. And again, circling back to Phil Stutz, I love that man, obviously. He talks about a shadow self.
Yes.
And we have this idea that we have to pack our shadow away and hide it because it's not pleasing. It's a shadow, right? Like they can be a little bit scary.
Yeah.
And Phil's point, like I know him, Phil, who I've never met Phil. Dr. Stutz's point is No, you bring the shadow into the room with you.
Yeah.
Because the more you leave it outside, the more it fights to come in. And then you're no longer
Yeah.
present because you're like, shut up, quit knocking at the door, shut up, leave us alone. Like, and he likened
Alone.
it because I guess, I don't know if he works with a lot of people in entertainment, I think, or whatever, that when they would say to him, when I left my shadow outside of the audition room, I did a piss poor job.
Oh.
Because I was focused on keep it out, keep it out, keep it out, don't let it in. But if I integrated it into all the other parts of me and just let it be there as much as I would let my light in, then I was okay.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. That's brilliant. I think that's a great place to end our conversation today because I think you and I could chat for
Probably.
years because I really love where you're going with this. One last question before we
Oh,
wrap. What do you do for intentional well-being? How do you take care of yourself? What does it mean to you?
it's a very new idea to me.
Yeah.
I think I've been doing it for a while, like since I sent that email to you. So like email
All those years
now.
ago. Hmm?
And that was, something I really wanted to touch on. And I do want to answer your last question because I don't actually want to keep you forever, even though I probably feel.
I do.
But
I love it.
what you said about teaching me and others about what movement actually is and what yoga actually is. It was such a beautiful full circle moment for me when I was in yoga teacher training with you. Because you talked about that again. You said that phrase again, as long as you're breathing, you can do yoga. And that got me right in the feels because I was like, she said that to me like the first time we met.
Yeah.
And here she is walking the walk. And I was just, obviously so proud of you, but proud of myself as well for reaching out to you in the first place and allowing myself, thanks to you, but there had to be some agency on my part to live into that full circle moment where the woman who taught me was now teaching me how to teach. And it just, I can't. I can't.
Oh. I was so thrilled when you reached out to me and said, something is calling me to this teacher training. And I don't know if it's going to be right for me. I don't know if it's the right time. And you had a little bit of doubt. And I'm like, it is.
Yeah.
The fact that you reached out says to me that you are ready.
Yeah. But whenever I have doubt, you're just like, get to the front of the room, like the hot yoga stuff.
Oh, yes.
You
I
have
was
to
not
tell that
having it.
story before we go back to
Oh,
about,
absolutely. So part of our intentional well-being practice before, I would say, COVID is Friday night. They had I don't remember. It was just like a Friday night flow class. And I wasn't a hot yoga person at the time, but Christine wanted to go to hot yoga. And I'm like, oh, you want to go to, she'd say, do you want to go to yoga class with me? And I'm like, yeah, great. Oh, we're going to go to Moto. And I'm like, hot yoga? Oh, I love the heat. And I'm like, okay, yes, no, I want to go to yoga.
And now, just sorry to interrupt, but the roles have reversed. I cannot go back to hot yoga now because
it's too hot.
Well, and the germophobia,
right, I get
COVID has really, and that's going to lead me to one more anecdote that I do want to share before I answer your final question. But yeah, you finish with this one first.
So we roll up to, I say roll up because I drove there. I didn't actually walk there, which we could. It's close enough in our neighborhood that I could, and often
everything's close in our neighborhood.
It is. It's a small town. And so I get to the Moto studio. First thing I noticed is your van is completely open, but you're not in it. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what happened here. Let me just go to the front. You're in the front, you're chatting. And we get all ready, put our stuff away in the locker. And then you, my friend, try to situate yourself in the back of class. And as a yoga teacher, I can't do that. Okay. For one, I'm looking at everybody else's practice. I'm wondering why somebody's not coming around and giving people instruction on their form or whatever. Plus, I was not going to have you step to the back of the room and pretend and believe of yourself that you didn't have a right to be in this space. That is how I read it when you went
That
to the
was
back
not
of the room.
wrong.
I went,
That was
I was like, that was not wrong. Is that what
Yeah.
you said? I was like, how? No, no, no. And you would say stuff like, well, what if people can't see? And I'm like, well, that's their problem. Like, we are going to roll up to the front of the room. And when I say roll up, I mean roll up.
I got you.
Roll
It's
up.
fine.
Like, that's
Use
you
the
know what I
word
mean?
roll. We're good here. Like, we're
Okay.
rolling to the front of the room.
Yes, I mean, like me and my homies, which was you and your other friend whose name I can't remember in the moment.
Right.
But we went right up to the front of
Yeah.
the room and right in the middle center front. And your whole thing is, what about the people behind me? Who cares? Right? You have a right to be at the front of the room. You have a right to participate in this class, and you sure as shit are not going to the back of the room. I said, I don't roll like that.
But here's
And so we were up
the
front.
lesson I've learned since then. Okay, I'm going to tell you what that is. There's a difference between taking up space with a capital S and sucking all the oxygen out of the room.
Absolutely.
And I used to conflate the two. I thought, oh my God, if I go to the front, people aren't going to be able to see. And it's going to suck all the oxygen out of the room, whatever. And then you're like, mm-mm. And I was like, oh. So I'm realizing I can take up space without taking up space. You know what I mean?
I do, without sucking all the energy out of the room and constantly being the center of attention.
Yeah.
But I wanted to show people in that space that everybody belongs in that space, because in that particular studio, by design or maybe by no fault of their own, I can't speak to that, there's a perception, right? It's like a yummy, mummy, Lulu, Gymshark kind of situation. And I want people to see that this is not it. That's not why we're here.
Yeah. And I don't know, whether it's that space or another space. Like, I don't know that is the vibe they set out to create.
But I think yoga's perception in and of itself creates that in the West.
Inadvertently or not, even if it's inadvertent, you got to figure that out.
Right.
So inadvertently or not, it's there. And it's the job of every teacher, studio owner, whatever, to be like, why is, like, how am I knowingly or not cultivating a space where only conventionally able-bodied, non-disabled, skinny, non-racialized, whatever people are showing up? So if you see that happening in your space, what can you need to change it?
You need to look at what are the barriers that are keeping others out of
and
space.
You know what? Maybe sometimes there's nothing that someone can do to change it, because maybe it's the demographics of where they live, or maybe, and the larger question for me is, how did we get to a place where people who use a mobility aid, whether it's a wheelchair or something else, what is that large scale perception? What is that systemic problem that predates this yoga studio I happen to be frequenting now? What is the systemic? Because me showing up there and taking up space is phenomenal. It's more than a massive first step. More than.
Right.
But there's, I don't know, I'm making up a number, a smallish number. There's 5 other me's who are in the sense of they might use some type of mobility device as well. Maybe not the same, but roughly, that are not going to show up there. So how does the systemic problem get solved? And like, I feel like I'm about to touch the stove here, but it's okay. It's what I do, sort of. But and
I touch the stove too often.
A recent conversation I had with someone, they said to me, and this was also like a real eye opener and a very powerful thing for me to think about. And I took it as a complimentary thing. They said, you take your work seriously, but not yourself. And I like that there was that balance there. I thought, oh, that's a good thing. That's something I want to be more mindful of, be more attention to.
Yeah.
But So I feel like I'm about to touch the stove here. Sorry, you can just edit this part out, but too much controversy. But this idea of, that's so hotly debated, particularly with our neighbors to the south, about affirmative action, right?
Oh, interesting.
And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
allowing racialized students to into particular four-year colleges or universities, particularly in the Ivy League, right?
Yeah.
And listen, I'm someone who, without fully understanding it, and maybe never
Yeah.
being able to fully understand it despite my best efforts, think that it's a
Mm-hmm.
great and powerful and not to mention necessary thing. Well,
It is.
equalization has to start somewhere.
Somewhere. Equity has to start somewhere. And the people who have the biggest problem with affirmative action don't understand who's benefited the
Correct.
most from affirmative action.
Not
Not necessarily people who look like me, but white
ex-
women.
exactly. Exactly. So someone like me is going to really score in that
Yeah.
situation, right?
Yep.
But
Yep.
assuming it was applied correctly and what I would like to believe was
Yes.
its intended application, I think it's
Yes.
hugely important. And it's a start,
Yes.
but it lights
Yes.
me absolutely on fire. It makes me crazy.
Mm.
See, I keep using that word.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry if that, I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. You're a therapist. You get to use it when you're applying it to
Well,
yourself,
okay,
right?
yeah, but it's still a word I should probably be more mindful of. But um
Absolutely. Me too. I'm
yeah,
working on it. We're
we're
working on
all
it.
working
We're
on
working
things,
progress.
right? And there's work
Yeah.
on all the time.
It's so many things to keep
Can't keep
track of.
track of all the things. But it lights me on fire and makes me bananas is what I'll say.
Yeah.
Yep,
I use
real
that a
thing.
lot.
Makes me bananas that forget arguing that. Leave that alone. When applied correctly, that
Yeah.
is a necessary tool. And
Yes.
everything in our possession is just a tool to get us to our next right thing, our greatest good, right?
Yes.
But I cannot stand when then there's no follow-up conversation about why affirmative action is needed in the first place. Because affirmative
Yes.
action will not resolve
The
why
issue. Yeah.
marginalized students, whether they're marginalized due to race or socioeconomic status or a combination of myriad of factors,
Yeah.
why they're not getting a seat at the table or the opportunity to have a seat at the table in the first place. Affirmative
Mm-hmm.
action is a plug in the hole of a leaky bucket. But what are you
Yes.
going to do about the rain that keeps coming down only on certain people, right? So
Exactly.
I don't think
Exactly.
you can have one without the other
The
meaningfully,
other.
but
Yeah.
leave
Agreed.
something alone. Like leave that.
Yeah.
Come
Yeah.
on. And the one
Yeah.
last anecdote that I wanted to touch on before I get to your question about intentional well-being, because it just plays into so much with what we've been talking about construction of who we are told we are, versus,
Mm-hmm.
and listen, I'm the one who made the point and will continue to make it probably for my whole life that sometimes we have to come to know who we are through the people who love us and who we trust the most, because
Yes. They hold up a
they
mirror,
hold up a
actually, right?
mirror. And if we've
Yeah.
covered over ourselves with that thin layer of crap, we need someone to sort of start with the light shining to get back to our own light, right? So I don't want to take
Yes.
anything away from that earlier point, but one of the things that I was told at a very young age was that I had a congenital neuromuscular disorder. It had a particular name. I'm not going to say it now. Flash forward, they didn't have genetic testing when I was born in 1980. Flash forward 32 years, I'm at a hospital in Hamilton meeting with a neuromuscular doctor. And he's asking me about my activities of daily living, and I'm telling him. And he's like, "Oh no, you can't do that. You have this condition. Let's call it condition X, just for this."
Okay. For reference. Yeah.
And I was like, because this doctor's looking at my file, right? And
It's not looking
condition
at you.
X was listed there. Wasn't looking at me, wasn't hearing me, was listening to respond, not to understand, all of the above, not to actually hear. So 45 minutes go by. I'm in tears. at this point.
Yeah.
He tells me, I think I've shared this with you privately before, Diane, but it's about to go public now. That
Here we
I'm
are.
something of a hypochondriac, because when I was a child, all I ever heard people say to my parents, people being doctors, say, well, she looks healthy. And in my child brain, that meant that I was supposed to look sick.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
and that bred this sort of hypochondria in me. So I have that in my head when I'm with this doctor. And like I said, 45 minutes go by. I'm in tears at this point. And I said, just give it to me straight. Tell me about my lifespan. Like, am I
Oh,
gonna, perish like any moment now? And he's like, no.
right.
He's like, this condition X doesn't affect that. And I'm like, whew, dodge that bullet. Okay. Then he's
Right,
like, well, unless
right.
you get pneumonia or something, then you're going to be gone for sure because your lung. And this is how he said it, right?
Just like that? Like you're not a human being sitting in front
I
of
think there was some neurodivergence going on with this doctor, far be it from
them? I've met a
who.
few of them.
But
Yeah.
as a physician, I would think that part of your training, part of the responsibility of training is to maybe develop some bedside manner, but that didn't seem fair. So now I start to cry harder. And then I said, but wait, I've had walking pneumonia and I'm still
Yeah.
like here. So I don't get. And then it was like a light bulb went off for this man. And he's like, oh, you don't have condition X. You have condition Y or Z. And I'm sitting there thinking, so now I'm like this fun little science experiment to him. And he wants me to go
Right.
on a breathing machine where I ended up in the 96th percentile. And I'm like, in your face. I you.
Yes, exactly. Thank you
But
very
now
much.
he wants to do genetic testing. And I'm just like this fun little thing and I did not pursue the genetic testing. And the reason I didn't is because words on that page in my file told him everything he thought he needed to know about me without listening to me. And so I think as important as language is, as important of a tool as it is just that. It is just a tool. It does not tell the full picture of our lives.
Right. Of who we are,
Of how we show up. And so we have to be very careful when we're ascribing anything, diagnoses, labels, value judgments, whatever, to other people. And we have to be intentional with how we speak, and not just how we speak, with how we think about people. Because I don't know, I'm sure lots of your listeners, and probably you too, are familiar with Glennon Doyle, the author.
Yes.
And I get, there's complications with that as well. But one thing she said when everything was going on with Ye, or Kanye, whatever he's called, and Kim K put out a statement that said, hate speech is wrong. And so Glennon Doyle, that went on Instagram and said, it's always interesting to me when people say that hate speech is wrong, because it's not the speaking of the hate, it's the having of the hate. That's the wrong. And she's like, either way,
I have to agree.
F hate speech, whether it's hidden on the outside or revealed on the inside, right? And so
yes,
staying away from hate speech, staying away from speech that is negative or devaluing and connotes, whether you're hiding it on the inside or speaking it on the outside, F that noise, and be really mindful about, intentional about what you're doing. So after getting us off track, sorry about that. But those were important things we needed to touch on. Come on. Absolutely. How often am I going to get to be here? I got to get it all out right now. Anyway, but you asked me about intentional movement and intentional well-being and what that means to me. And I realized I was practicing it long before I had conscious awareness or language of what I was doing. It started with that question. It started with emailing you. It started with practicing with you. It started with going to a gym, even though I'm like, I'm just going to go to the women's only section because.
Yeah, fair enough.
It started somewhere. That was it started with
nothing wrong
letting
with that.
you shove me to the front of a hot room and be like, this is where you're going.
shove is the
Metaphor.
particular word. I would like to say guide.
It was
No,
a
I'm just
metaphor. It
teasing
was a
you.
metaphor.
Metaphor. Yeah,
Let's not
absolutely.
even lie
I'm just
about it. No, I'm
teasing
just
you.
kidding. No. Guide me to the front of the room is an actual, more accurate word. Talk about being intentional in mind language. But now in this fourth decade of my life and being conscious about intentional well-being and intentional movement, and for me, those things mean allowing my body to do what it is telling me that it needs to do, including rest.
Rest. Oh my God. We have been as a society,
too much.
right? Just like driving the car with the engine light on, saying it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And we're driving at full speed toward the edge of a cliff with the engine light on, going, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. How many times have you said, I'll sleep when I'm dead? That is a saying that I've said a lot in my lifetime.
Oh, yes. I don't use that saying that much, again, because I'm a hypochondriac. So I'm like, fight that.
Sure.
No, but
Yeah.
in a different form or fashion, I've said or thought the exact same thing, right? Like, for sure.
Yeah.
But it's part of developing patience as I get older, which is a struggle for me. It's part of also realizing change is not this grand sweeping thing. It's the micro pivots you make every day to the direction you want to go in, to your next right thing, right? So
I love that.
Intentional well-being for me, on some days, it's a full-blown workout. It's like an hour, head down, weights on, cycle going, whatever. Get it in there, get her done, feel awesome. Sometimes it's a yoga practice. Sometimes it's breathing and meditation. Sometimes it's just, other days it's just like, my leg is uncomfortable. I'm going to move it an inch this way. Like, why am I an inch from comfortable? That doesn't seem right, right? Like,
right.
And more days than not now, I was like never a napper. And I realize now that it's not that I didn't nap because I wasn't tired. I was freaking tired all the time. I was like, oh my God, like just keep the engine running, even though the light's on, like you said. So now some days intentional well-being is a rest, an actual nap, an actual glass of water. Like a lot of times, sometimes I just need to drink. I'm just thirsty.
Right. And this is my 2-gallon jug of
You
water.
have your whole hydration station right there. I see. Love it.
I do.
And
because I'm bad at not drinking water, my skin dries out. I become just like a piece of tumbleweed.
So I think intentional well-being is being aware of what my body and also what my spirit and also what not my monkey mind, but my wise mind is telling me what to do. And being in alignment as much as I can with all of those three things. So intentional well-being and movement to me is different things on different days.
Which is beautiful.
Thank you.
I loved our conversation today. You just are such a light and a spirit. I'm grateful we are friends. We have to get together and do our Sweet Georgia Ray chicken sandwiches again.
Once we're off the podcast, we'll make a plan.
We'll make a plan. Yes. Let's go. We'll have to go. This year I've been less inclined to go outside just because it's been wet, damp, and gray. So I've been getting a lot of my intentional movement, on the indoors. I've been going to the gym like you and riding my bike, who I call Spinderella.
I love that.
We have a relationship, her and I. But yeah, we need to get back together. And I want to thank you for being a special part of my life and coming on the podcast and sharing your story, sharing your thought, sharing your vision, and sharing your spirit. Thank you to Christine Quaglia, co-author of Charlotte Shadow. If you haven't had a chance to pick it up, you can get this book on Amazon. To my American friends, it is very affordable and very necessary. So make sure you buy more than one copy. Today's podcast is sponsored by my Patreon account. So if you want to hear the preamble, the pre-show in which Christine and I talk about a lot of things, stay tuned. You can catch that on Patreon. And a big shout out to my producer, Nicole, who edits these podcasts and makes them beautiful for everybody. And once again, thank you everyone for listening. please make sure that you are being intentional with your well-being. Until next time, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.